Hi, and thanks for tuning in to Asia Gaming Brief's face-to-face series. I'm speaking today with Julian Hoskins, principal at Senet and a former general counsel at Tabcorp, one of Australia's largest wagering operators. Julian, thanks for sitting down with me, and welcome.
Thanks, Felix. Thanks for having me.
So we're here to look into your crystal ball, so to speak. I think it's safe to say it's been a very challenging time for Crown in the last few months. And there's been a lot of cracks in the system that have reared their ugly heads in recent Royal Commission inquiries. And Julian, just before this call, you mentioned that you identified some very real changes that are set to be implemented very soon in our gaming industry. What can you tell us about that?
What we're going to see is certainly much more focus on regulatory compliance. We're going to see this is identified in Victoria and New South Wales, and no doubt will probably come out of WA, new regulators that are going to be established where they will focus entirely on gambling, and in particular teams that sit within casinos. This is almost going back to frameworks that we had previously where regulators weren't responsible for liquor. Liquor consumes an enormous amount of resources within a regulator. We'll have dedicated standalone regulators. The other thing that I expect will follow, an incredible amount of work needs to be done in relation to responsible gambling. We've seen some of the issues that have popped up as a result of the Crown Royal Commissions, particularly out of Victoria, and loyalty programs, I think, will need to be rejuvenated as part of the regulatory reform that will follow.
Crown got into a lot of hot water over their over their culture, the corporate culture. One in which issues were not being reported, or they were getting stuck in the middle somewhere. And Crown is the unlucky operator that got singled out, and now they're getting dragged through the mud for it. But what about the rest of clubs, pubs, and any other gaming venue operator? Do you expect them to have to make a lot of changes to get ahead of this?
I don't expect that what is happening at Crown at the moment is going to be unique to Crown. I think it's fair to say that this will play out in relation to licensed gaming venues and other operators. There's no doubt about that. And we've seen even one example, which is both the Star and Crown Sydney, Barangaroo, agreed to cashless gaming. And we would expect that will probably eventually push into licensed gaming venues as well, which it's certainly in terms of responsible gambling, AML, being able to track patterns of behaviour, spending patterns, is where you'd expect regulatory reform to go.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that, actually. We recently did an article looking at Aristocrat's cashless gaming trial, which is the first in the nation, to offer a digital wallet. I wonder, everything that's happening with Crown, and we know that there's the pros of digital wallets for RG and for AML purposes. Will what's happening with Crown accelerate the adoption of digital wallets and change regulators' thinking a little bit quicker?
Yes, I think it will. Even for AML purposes, it's very, very difficult in an environment which is reliant on cash to be able to identify issues. And you can have lots of security people standing around monitoring and observing play and CCTV and the like. But being able to track through card-based gaming is you obtain a rich source of data, and that data can feed into AML CTF compliance. Casinos typically have very, very detailed AML CTF programs, as you'd expect. But where there is a potential weakness is relying on human interaction, and there needs to be human interaction, but human interaction in circumstances where there's player anonymity. So there is a disconnect there at the moment.
You mentioned that human factor that comes into play, and I understand. We had issues where staff were not trained properly in responsible gaming. They got like 40 minutes of training in their induction, but this went all the way up to the executive level when it came to AML. We had former CEO Ken Barton, who said he had less than, so he didn't actually have any formal AML training until 10 years into the job, which was the headline that we saw earlier. So what about this? What needs to change?
Two immediate areas that require improvement, Felix. One is, and we see this in our practice, ensuring that those that are responsible for the senior management and control of an organisation actually understand how the organisation functions, because if they don't, given they're setting the risk framework, it makes it quite difficult to say, well, okay, we're setting the risk framework, but we don't really understand how the business operates properly. That is an area that's absolutely critical. And I think you'll find in terms of Crown rebuilding its board and its management team, it will, and it started doing this, it will ensure that it has the right experience on board, so people that understand the business. The other thing is training is absolutely critical, and that's across AML, RG, and other areas. It's not just limited to those, but RG from the perspective of tailored training that actually suits the organisation rather than rolled out quite generic tick the box type training, which you tend to see from time to time. And I think certainly just in the case of AML CTF, the expectation from Austrac is that training programs are tailored and are bespoke and unique to the organisation, and so too should be the AML CTF program. So I think they're areas that will go through significant reform.
One extra point that you made that I'd like to go into is kind of the impact for gaming manufacturers. And obviously, at the end of the day, their product is what is, potentially what's causing customers to enjoy maybe a little bit too much. And it's causing certain, responsible gaming issues. So when it comes to manufacturers, do you expect a change from the way that they do things or the way that they offer their products as a result of everything?
Yeah, I would expect that perhaps some of the mechanics, some of the features of games may well alter as a result of what we're seeing here, just in terms of customer interaction and what customers can do in relation to play. So we have Australian and New Zealand gaming machine standards, which each of the states and territories add their own addendum to and have adopted, that set out a number of things that are required to be taken into consideration by regulators when they approve equipment and games. And included in that is a long list of responsible gambling measures. So regulators need to have regard to that before they go and approve games and before they approve equipment. I expect that coming out of the Royal Commissions, there will be a revamp of the Australian New Zealand gaming machine standards. I think that's work that needs to be done. It's pretty light in relation to RG at the moment, and there needs to be a focus there, and I would fully expect that regulators will start looking at that following the tightening of regulatory obligations and reform in the states and territories. Any ideas on what functions or things that needs the most focus at the moment? I suspect probably maybe it's less in the nature of hardware, but probably more in the nature of software in terms of the types of games and some of the features of games. And we've seen that in terms of functionality, the more rapid games and certainly the ability to place a higher number of bets and consecutively places high number of bets as possible is what can lead to potential issues. So I can imagine that regulators will be focused on that going forward. And it's a bit hard to say in terms of crystal ball gazing, but I would expect that the gaming machine standards will be updated as part of the regulatory reform.
Well, Julian, as always, really great hearing from you. Very insightful. I look forward to your more detailed report coming out next week.
Thanks, Felix. Thanks for having me.
And that was Julian Hoskins of Senet, talking to us about some of the consequences as a result of Crown Resorts' royal commissions and the implications for gaming in Asia and Australia.